Welcome back to the show. Today, I've got Christian Banach here to talk about growth in agencies. Christian Banach does growth consulting for a lot of marketing agencies. He's owned his own agency. He's been in the revenue generation side of larger agencies as well. Christian, welcome to the show and thanks for coming on.
Yeah, Karl, excited to be here. Thanks for having me on.
And we are basically neighbors. We both live in Chicago, although we have not gotten to get in-person time yet. It's summer, so we're both traveling and doing family stuff and work stuff, and it's just been a little crazy. So someday we're going to get that in-person coffee. But in the meantime, what is your highlight of Chicago summer? Do you have a certain event or festival you always go to or anything like that?
I love the pool. I just love to be outside in the sun. So when it's pool season, you'll find me listen to a podcast, like these, just chilling by the pool. So I definitely enjoy that.
I love it. Yes, definitely love I think it was like 2 or 3 weeks ago, the public pool is open. We got one right around the corner from our house. So immediately got the kids there and we're there like 3 days the first week. So right there with you.
Love it. Love it.
Well, Christian, thanks for coming on. You have a great, I normally don't make people give their life stories, but I want to hear your initial agency founding story because it's so unique. You were in high school, you started an agency, and you ended up working with some really big A-list celebrities doing an event agency. So tell me about the story. Like, how did you get your first company off the ground, and then what led to it growing so quickly, and what led to its success?
Yeah, it really was an idea that several friends of mine had that let's throw our own. We were going to like teen dance clubs and things like that in the Chicago suburbs when we were, 17, 18 years old. And we decided, we think we could do better than what was out there. So we went out and decided to rent a banquet hall and booked some of the DJs that were popular in the area at the time. And like right off the bat, the first one was a big success. And I had ended up going away to college and I kept doing these events as a way to help pay my way through college. After I graduated, I went in and got a job as a marketing director at a company, but I was also doing these events on the side and was having more fun and making more money, honestly, doing these events. So eventually, after about a year, decided, this is what I want to do with myself. So I ended up leaving that marketing director role and went all in on the business. And what started as banquet halls turned into larger concert venues, and what started as local DJs turned into large or popular artists. We worked with Lady Gaga, we worked with Pitbull, we worked with some really great artists, and that's really was the business in the beginning. And then kind of by luck, we got a random email from a marketing agency that was looking for some help with an activation here in Chicago. And we had concert promotion and production capabilities, which lended very well to this particular activation. So we helped them out. It went over really well. That led to another opportunity with that agency. And then that really exposed me to experiential and event marketing. And a light bulb went on and said, while it's great to throw my own concerts and events, I'm putting all my money on the line versus when I was doing it for a corporate company, they were giving me money to produce it. So that was a cool value proposition for me at the time. So the business ended up turning into part concert promotions, and then the other half of that was experiential and event marketing. And I ran that business for about 15 years and was successful, and decided, our time, this was maybe like 2008 when the recession was happening, the Great Recession, that it was time for maybe me to move on and do something else. So I sold off some assets of that business, and I really enjoyed the marketing side of the business that I had developed. So I went all in then into business development roles at agencies, and for a period of about 10 years, worked at large agencies, small agencies, independent holdco companies, and discovered kind of my superpower, if you will, was really the business development side, and in particular helping the companies I was working with land these large enterprise opportunities, and that's kind of how the journey happened.
Right, and then now you're kind of consulting, paying it forward essentially to agencies to share how you do this. Now I want to back up because you said a lot of things there, and I'm super fascinated. So. As a essentially kid just out of college, you decided not quite to go full in on this, but you were doing it on the side. How did you make that decision at that time? I know this is kind of like digging way back, but I'm always curious about this because it sounds like you had very little to lose by going full time on the event business, and yet you were still like, maybe I should hedge my bets and get a job first, and then you kind of came back to it. Like, what was that like in your mind? Was it a I just want a little bit of financial security thing? Was it more of like I don't know if this is even a real business thing? Like, what were you thinking?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of both. I I was young. I didn't know any better. The path that everybody tells you is go to college, get a job, right? Well, that's what I did. And I didn't know, was this a real business? Because at the time, especially, it was more banquet halls. And I was making good money, but is that a real job? It's not a 9 to 5. I'm not clocking in. I don't have a boss. So I think I needed that experience to go work for somebody else, get the stability. I was still living at home actually at the time with my parents, so I had very little to lose, like you said. So I said, let's roll the dice. What's the worst that can happen here?
Yeah, I love it. I think I did a similar thing where I didn't go right into business for myself after college. And I think it was a little bit of that, like you just get told for your whole life, well, you're supposed to go to school, then you're supposed to get a job. And it's almost like this, I had to wait a bit to break free of that supposition before I was really ready. So, okay, another question. I'm always fascinated by how these things happen, and it kind of dovetails into what your business is now and the sort of thesis of your business now around relationship-based business development. So, how do you build the relationships, or how did you initially get connected with people who have the connections to high level, like A-list celebrities at the time, Pitbull and Lady Gaga? I mean, certainly very well-known celebrities. Give me that story. Like, does it all happen through agents behind the scenes? Did you know somebody who knew somebody? Like, what happened there?
Yeah, I think it was I wish I would have an answer as one specific thing, but I think it's very similar to what we preach to clients today. I mean, it was about building relationships. One of the, good benefits of when you're in the sort of concert and events business is that, that your people want to go to those events. So people are reaching out to you. They want to get VIP. They want free tickets. You are inviting them out. You have a great value proposition. Hey, come on out. I can, host you at one of our events. So, just sort of innately started meeting people, started off not knowing anybody, but then over the years started meeting the right people. Meeting agents, meeting record executives, meeting other promoters, meeting the artists themselves and their managers. So you just start building relationships with them. And, if you're doing good events and which we did, and they were quality, people want to come and get to know you and meet you. And it was really about just sort of networking and building and maintaining those relationships over time. And you just start to kind of move up the ladder, so to speak, over time.
I think this is such a fundamental thing that a lot of entrepreneurs who are very successful do well. And it gets kind of, it doesn't get talked about as much as maybe it should, in my opinion. So what I'll drill in here too is essentially like you made yourself a destination for the right kind of people, by running these events that people wanted to go to, people in the industry, people who are connected to really other, people. You kind of force yourself into the center of this very important, hub and spoke. And I think that's a really cool thing to do. I was just listening to recently Jesse Itzler, who started a jet rental company many years ago. And he had nothing. He had no jet to start with. It wasn't like he was a kid that just like was a good talker, right? Good salesperson, good visionary. And what's interesting though is all his clients in his first few years and that he directly connected with, he did every single work, piece of legwork to get those jets for these clients. They're all billionaires. And so sure, that business was successful and it sold to Berkshire Hathaway, but every one of his future endeavors sort of leveraged the relationships he had from that first business, right? And it's just such a like, oh yeah, like those relationships are not something that it's just about the transaction today. It's also about the 5, 10, 20 years out relationship that you have. And I'm sure that's come around in your career as well, being that you've been at this a long time.
Yeah, absolutely. Even a podcast like this I is a great way to network and meet people. But I loved how you put that, becoming a destination. And I think a lot of what we advise even clients on today is not necessarily throwing concerts with Lady Gaga and Pitbull, but, your version of what that is for your business.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So, okay. Let's get into it because I know we both see a lot of the same challenges at agencies. I mean, one of the most common ones is just like, how do I get consistent deal flow? So many agency owners, you had a good post on LinkedIn about how like in general, it's harder to win business this year than it was a year or two ago. I've seen that in both of our companies, with some exceptions, but like in general, it's just kind of a tougher process than it was. And some agencies have done a good job in my experience, what I've seen, getting good, consistent deal flow through a number of ways. Others have just really gone to zero. And it's been crazy to see. We had 2 big competitors shut down last year at one of my companies. And so give us the rundown in your mind. Like, what is it that kind of builds the fundamentals that keep deal flow coming even when times are tougher?
Well, I think it's big intentional, number one. I think a lot of agency owners sort of stumble in it. They're sort of accidental agency owners. They might have worked for somebody else. They were doing good work. Maybe they were freelancing, and then they decide at one point to kind of break out on their own. And their initial client base is usually somebody that they know, professionally or even personally that brings them in. And work is good. And then that leads to maybe another piece of business and another. But what ends up happening at some point, and so for some that's very early on, for some that might be a little bit later on, but they become over reliant on referrals. And we're all for referrals. I love referrals. They close faster, but the problem with referrals is you don't know when they're going to come in. You don't know who they're going to come in from. So it's really hard to predict and scale your business if you're 100% reliant on referrals. So I think the firms that are doing well have, they'll use referrals, but they also have a way to proactively build new relationships and generate new opportunities. And I think that's really one of the fundamentals, is just, baking that into your business, early on. So then there's a whole lot of other things that kind of go along with it, which I'm sure we'll get into. But, I think that at the top level is really, first and foremost, not relying on the referrals and having a proactive way to generate more opportunity.
I love this. And let's just dive right into this thread, because I think I agree with you fundamentally that like a lot of our maybe my highest leverage point as an owner is building new relationships that will lead to business in probably 3, 6, or 24 months. Like, I don't know, it's just got to be like, sometimes it just has to be me though, because I'm the one with the CEO title and I'm the one who knows people who know people. It's just like, I'm this connector. So how do you start this process? And one of the questions I get a lot is from people who have really, they're in their agency running it day to day, and they're like, I don't have time to take random meetings. And their agency is often like serving 5 or 10 different industries. So they don't have any central place to start, like from. Where do people get started here though? Like when somebody's just all over the place and running their agency, how do you kind of get them directed, like you said, intentional?
Yeah, I think there's a couple key decisions that need to be made early on, which are really the fundamentals of what you'll use for your proactive program. But one is really getting clear on what are the problems that you solve, right? So why do clients come to you? What is that urgent and important business challenge that you're uniquely positioned to solve? Because to your point, like you said, people are all over the place, and they're trying to solve all these different types of marketing challenges. And what ends up happening is they are, a jack of all trades, but master of none. So, and especially if you're going through referrals, that can tend to happen a lot because, hey, can you do this? Yeah, I could do that. And you just sort of can do everything. And in marketers, we like to do everything. We like the variety. And entrepreneurs, we like to do a lot of different things. And that can work if you're more, again, referral based. But once you start moving into where you're going to be proactively, you got to start narrowing your focus because you can't boil the ocean. So that's one of the key things, is understanding the problems you solve. And then the other thing is who you solve it for, and starting to pick, it could be industries, it could be, specific, audience segments that you're really good at, Gen Z marketing or millennial marketing, but it's getting really clear on who that target audience is, because just like you can't solve every single marketing problem out there, you can't solve it for every type of client. And people these days, they want you to be an expert at something. So whether that be, hey, we're digital marketing experts for, consumer packaged goods company or some sort of, niche, that's really what, where the foundation, has to come from, is that problem and as well as that audience.
Yeah, I agree. And I think the agencies that grow really quickly and tend to grow bigger are the ones that figure out where their beachhead market is really quickly, and they leverage the hell out of it, and they get really good at that one area, and then you can always expand, right? And the other thing I'll add, because this has come up on the show a lot, is even if all your front facing marketing and the sales collateral you have is aimed at a certain industry or certain niche, it doesn't mean you can't ever take on a project that's outside of that. It doesn't mean that you can't ever say yes to a good referral that's a good client name, even if it's weird. We do that kind of thing all the time when the right kind of client comes in. You get some Fortune 100 that wants you to bid on a certain project, and you're like, we can do it. It's not our main scope, but like it'd be great to have their name to trade on. It'd be great to have that like relationship. Maybe you do take some of those, but again, it doesn't just having your front facing branding, be focused on a certain niche does not preclude you from doing some of that. And so I think it's one of those ways to overcome that fear. But I'd be curious to hear from you, Christian, like what else do you tell owners who are like scared to narrow down their focus like that?
Yeah, I mean, I would 100% agree with what you just said. And I think that is one of the biggest challenges when we're asking people to niche down is that they're worried about all the other business that they're going to, lose. And I get it, but we've seen it time and time again, those same referrals that are coming in. If you've been referred, even if it's not on your website that you do A, B, and C, these referrals tend to still, want to work with you. So that is really, I don't hear very often that a referral came in and, oh, well, it doesn't say it on your website, we don't want to work with you. So I think, people see it as being limiting, but the reality is it's empowering once you have a niche, and, you can go much deeper and you can get much better at solving those problems. And like I said, that's really what we see in the data backs on these companies want to be working with experts, subject matter experts on things. And when you're competing in a world where, especially remote now, where you're really competing at a global level now that, so you really need to be an expert at something. And I think, and that being said, like, you don't have to only be an expert at one thing, right? There could be, and oftentimes we do advise, maybe you're picking 2, 3, or 4, different lanes that you can play in. But so it's not even just necessarily one, but, picking a couple of different lanes and making some bets with that. Because again, what you don't want to necessarily do is run into a situation where you're all in maybe on one industry, and then that industry there's an issue. Like let's look back at the pandemic with travel, what happened, and then you might be out of business. So you can make a couple of bets, but there's a big difference between making 2, 3, 4 bets and saying, hey, we do everything for everybody.
Yeah, very much. Okay, so let's say I'm an owner and I've figured out like, okay, I know I want to focus on this particular niche. My best clients are there and it's the best ROI projects. Like it's great. And then I know that I want to offer or solve this problem for them, whatever, it's a marketing problem, sales problem, whatever. How do I how do I grow my network there? What's the next step? Like, how do I go build a landscape and figure out like who the people I need to meet, and then go actually get in front of them and get time? Because you mentioned this in one of your LinkedIn posts, like cold email is super hard to do these days. I think maybe some people are still pulling it off, but it's not like I can just go cold email the 5 CEOs I want to meet at my target customers and get meetings with any of them. Like it's not going to happen. It's going to be more difficult than that. So what do we do? How do we get in front of those people?
Yeah. So I think one of the first steps is, once you've sort of picked your lanes, is to create basically a target account list. Like, who are the companies, the accounts that, fit that profile. So you're building out an ideal company profile, because just because you've picked a lane, like, again, automotive companies, let's say, doesn't mean that all automotive related companies are a good fit for you. Maybe it is based on geography or revenue size or some other, characteristics. So you want to get very clear on the type of companies within that niche that makes sense for you. But then you got to take it a step further, and you have to actually build a list of, here are the X number of companies that fit that profile that we want to make sure know who we are. And that's, I think, a big step that get missed, that they just want to, hey, we're just going to do an industry, right? But once you know the certain companies, then you can start to run specific sales and marketing programs to those companies. To ultimately, the goal at first is to drive awareness. If brands don't know who you are, the likelihood of them responding to a cold email or a DM or any sort of request that you have is slim. Right? We see it time and time again. And this is something that has accelerated over the years. When I first kind of started this, or even when I first started this company 5 years ago, this was not as important. But this day and age, with AI and everything else that is happening, some level of brand awareness is critical. So you want to make sure, but again, you can't, when I say brand awareness, like, this is not like a B2C company that you want the whole world to know about you. You might only want 100 companies to know who you are, or a couple hundred companies, but you need to know who those companies are first off, so you can run specific plays to them. But it really starts then with building that list and then running those brand awareness campaigns. And in the context of B2B, the brand awareness, in our experience has been really about thought leadership content and making sure that, you're not just running ads to these companies, but you are sharing your unique expertise, your point of view on how to solve those critical business challenges that they're likely experiencing. And that's what draws these prospects in, to you and gets them to know you and understand what your services happen to be about. So that's really the kind of first couple steps.
That's great. Do you have any specific examples? And I know that this obviously like part of, consulting is figuring out for each client what makes sense, right? Because some people, like I may come in and I have certain skills and certain opinions that are good to leverage, and others that you're going to say, they probably don't need to use that for now. But anyway, like, do you have a good example of like a specific agency that came to you guys and started working with you on this? And like, what was the campaign they built to build that awareness initially?
Yeah, a couple different ones, come to mind. I think again, it kind of all ladders up to what I've been saying. It's getting clear on what those problems are, for whom, and then having a unique point of view on how to solve that problem and translating that into thought leadership content. What tends to do really well, the types of thought leadership content, are things like original research, because again, especially now, information is so accessible. Buyers are doing their own, research on their own. So if you're just rehashing the same type of content that everybody else, that's already out there, it's not going to resonate and hit as hard as when you're doing something, more original. So if again, you're looking in a specific industry and you've done research in the industry about this problem, you're looking maybe at some of your companies' competitors and you're benchmarking them. Those are all really, powerful type of things. Or experience that you've had personally in your firm solving specific problems. So your own case studies and expertise and your team's working across clients. So and then how that actually comes to life, it could be through, research reports, it could be blog posts. Wouldn't say there's one kind of magic bullet format, in fact, like we encourage, to start maybe with a longer form piece of content, but then repurpose that content into different formats and for different channels, because people, some people might like audio better than video. Some people might like text. Some people like short forms, long form. Sometimes you got to see something 3 or 4 times before you actually sit down and actually read it. So we've seen, this work across a lot of different clients in many different ways. But I would say like the more original type of research that you could do. And when I say original, sometimes that scares off people because they think of some really expensive long-term study and you got to hire this market research firm. It doesn't necessarily need to be, quite like that. You can run up things with SurveyMonkey or tools like Winter. There's a lot of really inexpensive ways to get some, niche research. And again, if you're focused in what that research is supposed to be about, it can actually be fairly affordable and really unique and ownable asset for your firm.
I'll give you a really good tactical example. I totally agree. This is how it's funny because this is like my playbook for marketing is the same kind of thing. And I think it's really powerful. So, for example, we go to a couple big conferences, industry conferences every year, and all the vendors there that have booths are our target clients. So it's great because we can go as attendees and we can go troll the booths and basically meet our like prospects, our clients, our people in the industry who are really influential. And then what we can do is do like quick 5-minute surveys. So we'll go to the booth, we'll ask for who's the who runs marketing here. They happen to be here. We'll try to get 5 minutes of their time, answer 5 or 6 questions in a survey, and then take that. Again, these are big conferences. 100 plus vendors. So we've got now 100 plus data points from marketing leaders at companies in our industry. And then that's a report that we can easily publish as many different things, like you said, like a blog post. We could do a video rundown. We could do a little downloadable 1-page PDF. And then we can distribute that out to our clients, prospects, future prospects, people in the industry. It's a cold outreach like sort of angle. And then all the people we had individual conversations with at the conference are also leads now because they're interested in the answers to those results. So they're giving us their answers and then giving us an email and a phone number. So it's a super, again, the whole thing costs $2,000 probably. You go to the conference, you show that up there for 2 or 3 days. Like, it's not that expensive. It does take a little time and it takes some effort to plan and all that. But you come out with this super unique asset that can't be replicated by any of your competitors. It's super it's interesting because it is so unique and it's directed at the target audience we had. Plus, just doing getting the data gave us contacts with 50 to 100 people that we wanted to reach anyway. So again, that does take a lot of time. I think here's the argument against this kind of marketing often is that it takes a long time. Like, I can't build that overnight and get sales calls from it. I'm going to take 6 months to a year just to start getting calls from that work that I spent at these conferences. What do you say to people that are in that short-term mindset? Like, how do we shift our thinking as agency owners?
It is a shift in thinking, and our philosophy really is what we call relationship making, which we've kind of touched upon. And the bottom line is relationships don't happen overnight. They do take time to build. But I'm a business owner. You're a business owner. I also understand there are immediate, pipeline concerns often that need to be filled, and you may not have 6 months to a year to generate opportunities. So I think it's really, when we're working with clients, we're thinking oftentimes in parallel paths. There are certain tactics that tend to produce shorter term results, and I think it's important to have some of those in play, as soon as possible. And then there are your more longer term plays that I think it's really kind of having a pronged approach, but you really do need to shift your mindset, because many times, even though I've explained that, a lot of clients don't want to focus on the long term. They just want to focus just on the short term, and it's a short shelf life for that. You're only going to be able to get so much out of those types of campaigns. So and I unfortunately see too many companies burn through money. They'll talk to other vendors, or they'll talk to people within their team, and they'll just kind of jump from short term tactic to short term tactic. And here we are 2-3 years later, and I'm regrouping with somebody, and they've just basically burned 2 to 3 years of time by jumping to these short-term tactics. Whereas if 2 or 3 years prior, they would have just, gone down, the path that we explored, with them, they would be in a much different, position.
Yeah. Yeah. And I agree with you. I think it's try to do both at the same time, so that I always think about it like you're going to be doing 2 types of marketing with an agency. One is the long-term kind of whale hunting, right? So you're going to go after these really big Fortune 500, Fortune 1000, whatever accounts that you would dream accounts, your whatever your dream list is, whatever your industry. You've got those. Those are going to take unknown amounts of time. Even when you get them to a point where they say, yes, it could take 6 to 12 months just to get the procurement. So like, you just can't count on those coming in every month. Those are like long-term things you're going to always be working, but they're not urgent. They're always important, but not urgent. And then you have the urgent type of marketing, which is probably going to close you smaller deals. So cold outreach, even things like inbound from SEO, inbound from webinars and things. Like, you'll get, smaller companies, smaller budgets, smaller, whatever, but they might move faster. And so you can kind of fill in your gaps, and, you close these multi-$100,000 contracts or $1 million contracts up here with this, the long-term efforts. But then on the short-term efforts, you might close $20,000 contracts, $10,000 contracts, stuff that keeps the lights on day to day. And both are important. And I think, again, the really good agencies know how to do both at the same time, so that they have this a steady stream of small deals. And then every now and then, every so many months, they've got one of these big ones coming in. Yeah. Okay, cool. So let's say I start getting the attention of some of my target accounts. How do I actually get the right person? Because this is something I'm currently struggling with, which is we often attract people who are too low in the pecking order, or don't have authority or budget, don't really have the ability to sort of contribute strategically. What are some things you advise clients on when it comes to like getting the intro to the right person? Whether it's I have some intro and I'm trying to move up the ladder, or I've got like somebody in the wrong department trying to move across, into other departments or expand within clients. Like, what do we do to kind of build that network out within a client?
Well, just as we, described earlier and talked about knowing the right companies that you need to be reaching out to, I think it's also around understanding who are the right people within those organizations. So having a clear buyer persona, and, we look at those in kind of 2 different levels. One is your decision makers. So who are the people that could actually write the checks? And then who are the influencers, within those organizations that might not be the decision maker, but they might help, be a champion to help sell it in. So part of the process then that, we take clients through and we do for ourselves is, building a prospect list of both of those decision makers and those influencers. And what we're trying to do with our marketing efforts is we're trying to drive engagement at a company level. So somebody within that organization is liking our LinkedIn post, is opening our email newsletter, is attending one of our webinars, et cetera. So we want that account level engagement, but we also, to really consider an account engaged, we want multiple people within that organization interacting. And we've seen the data that if you can get 3 or more people interacting with your brand, it's exponentially higher that they will meet with you and then, longer term, work with you. So it's really kind of having air coverage. It's not just about reaching out to one person. It's about trying to reach out to multiple people in those organizations. But you have to have something that these people want, and again, just to kind of rely on cold email or, a LinkedIn DM, it's really challenging, especially when the higher up you go. Some of the more junior level people, they may be out there searching, for information. And so it's maybe kind of easier to reach them. So when we're talking about the higher level, again, it's a lead magnet, an offer of some sort. So, some of the things that, we like, again, when we're talking back to like the original research, the executive level folks, like they want that type of information. So if you're to reach out to them and be able to offer them, exclusive access and a walkthrough of that research, they like that type of thing. So that's a great way to kind of open a door there. Using, things like virtual roundtable discussions is another really effective thing that we've been doing a lot of. And by that, I mean, it's instead of reaching out to these executives and trying to pitch your services, to them, you instead invite them to be a part of a roundtable discussion about some challenge that you suspect that their business is experiencing. And you're inviting your ideal prospects. So it could be 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 of your prospects to talk together amongst each other about this problem. And you're basically the facilitator of this group. And the prospects love it because they get an opportunity to meet their peers to talk about some of these challenges that they're experiencing. They may not even initially be coming for you. They're coming to meet their peers, but in the process, you're building a relationship with them. And that's another way, a great way to kind of go to the more executive level, because are they going to respond to your cold email? In many cases, probably not. But are they going to respond maybe to an invitation to an exclusive roundtable? Again, very different. And that kind of goes back to, what we talked about earlier with being the party promoter or, a concert promoter. Like you're in this context, you're putting together a roundtable party, right? So I think it's being just cognizant of, who you're reaching out to and what interests them. Podcast is another thing. A lot of these executives, they want to get their name out there. They're trying to build their own personal brand. So, having things like that. So you have to be more creative and more innovative when you're trying to reach out to the higher level people, at these larger organizations versus the more junior. They may be just interacting with your content and that's kind of good enough for them. So I think it's, trying to have air coverage across both, those decision makers and influencers.
Yeah, that's great. I love that. And I think the roundtable thing and joint webinar angle and the podcast angle, all really good ones. I think it's really important to understand what your prospect, your decision maker is wanting, not just from your services, but in life. And that sounds really big and philosophical, but like, you think about it, like get 5 or 6 industry execs in a room together. It's not just that they want to compare notes on how we all do marketing and all that. It's also, one of these people might hire me someday, or I might go, work this person's job when they move on to the next thing. I need to know when they're, looking. I need to know those people, so I know the right people, so I'm in the room at the right time. You know what I mean? So there's all this there's also job opportunities they're all looking for, subtly behind the scenes. They're all looking to be seen as experts by their peers. They're all looking to be sharing their unique knowledge because, again, they're doing their own thought leadership for their company and their personal brand. And just understanding that your prospects are complete people with a lot of different needs that aren't just whatever you offer, super important. And just, again, it comes down to this whole, that's how we build relationships with them rather than just going at it with, hey, you ready to start a podcast today? I can help you, or whatever that immediate call to action approach is. Okay, Christian, how do we get the owner out of some of these efforts, or is it possible? And the reason I ask this is often that, owners come and say well, I'm ready to get out of sales, or I hate doing sales calls. I'm ready to hire somebody. And I'm like, I always, kind of have this, well, are you really, question? Like we got to dig into this. How do you advise owners who are like, man, the sales stuff takes a long time. I kind of want to be out of some of it. But this stuff sounds very relational and very important, very high leverage. Like I probably am the only one who can do it. Where's the balance there?
So I think it depends a little bit on the stage of the business. General rule of thumb is, if you're under, say, 10, 12 people, you're probably still going to need to be, doing a lot of the sales, efforts. I think at the end of the day, it's your passion, it's your vision, it's your company. Like you're going to be the best salesperson. And at that point, you're still pretty small. You need to be involved having those conversations with prospects so you can understand what are their pain points, what are their challenges, and you can really kind of help shape your services and your go-to-market strategy accordingly. So, but I think, as you start to get a little bit larger, and even when you're, maybe 7, 8, 9 people, you can start to leverage, you don't have to do all of this, right? You can start working with people on your team. You could use automation tools, you can use offshore talent. So you can start to take off some of these processes off of your plate. So you can really be involved more in just having and building those relationships versus all the administrative tasks that go along with, getting those relationships, in the first place. So I think, that's key. And then kind of once you start moving, I think there's something that comes up a lot with clients that we talk to is, understanding, who is the right person to bring in, because a lot of companies are looking for unicorns. There's sort of those that are out there that are able to generate leads, and then there's those that are there to close leads. And there really is two different mindsets. And it's what we see, unfortunately, time and time again, is they bring somebody in, the company gets, and they're supposed to do both. The company gets, a couple RFPs that come in, and now they're focused on those pitches. And guess what falls by the wayside? Any of the prospecting. And then whatever they win, they lose, whatever happens to those RFPs, now they're back to square one, trying again to start these relationships. And it's just this revenue roller coaster that they keep going, across. So you need to make a decision. But first of all, you need to separate the two roles, right? And then we need to understand in your business, what are you challenged with? Like, do you have, a lot of leads coming in and you have good deal flow? Well, then if that's the case, you might need somebody that is more responsible for closing that business, right? Responding to the RFPs, closing the business. Now, most firms, though, that isn't necessarily the problem. It's they don't have the leads that are coming in the first place. So if that's the case, then maybe you need to start more for whether that is internal hires, whether that's outsourcing that task or a combination thereof. Maybe that might be the best place to start before you go out and you hire someone that's going to be, closing the deal. So it's being really, open and honest with yourself on where those challenges are, and then putting the right, people or team in place, accordingly. And I think the other thing is making a conscious decision on, how much you're going to allocate to sales and marketing efforts, from a financial, perspective. Generally speaking, we're looking at companies should be spending around 8 to 12% of their revenue on sales and marketing initiatives. And that includes, salaries and time. It's not just advertising expenses, but for so many agencies, like they're grossly under funding, these efforts. And then they wonder, well, why are the leads not coming in? Well, it's because you're not spending. And we see the higher growth firms, no surprise, are usually spending even more than that. So I think it's also being comfortable like that you're willing to make this commitment and not just make this commitment for a month or two, because again, we just discussed that is a short-term thinking. You need to have the stomach and the for putting this, out there for a year or more before you really are going to start to see the fruits of the labor. Now, are there other kind of leading indicators to see if your efforts are working? Yes, but you can't just expect short-term opportunities coming in the door right away.
Yeah, I love that you mentioned both those. Those are probably the two biggest mistakes I see in sales too. I just had and I'll reiterate this, but I just had a founder come to me and ask this same thing. Is like, do you know any rock star salespeople who help me grow my agency? And I said, hold on a minute. What does that mean? Like, do you have so many leads that you can't, schedule calls with people? Or are you like, I get 3 deals a week and I need somebody who's going to bring me 20. And, have you separated those roles? Do you have a process for this person? Like all these questions that I think you're getting at here is like, it isn't, what I kind of said to him was like, the person who's going to come up with that strategy, that high level growth strategy for you is probably not the person out there running your discovery calls. Just think about it. Like they're not interested in doing that kind of work, right? They're like high level strategic people. It's why you bring in a coach like you or a consultant like you, Christian, to help with the high level strategy. And then if there's like fractional people they can bring in as, SDRs to help like, drum up initial calls or take initial calls, or there's closers you can hire. Like either way, those are other roles, right? It's not, you don't want to condense all those into one because that's unrealistic and probably too expensive for what you're going to get. And it's just that, that's what everybody looks for. That's the big mistake that everybody makes when they say, I need to hire sales. And then the other thing is, like you said, underfunding it and saying, well, I don't want to cut my net margins. I think I see this a lot with the businesses around 500K and $1 million in revenue, somewhere in that range for agencies, tends to be all founder driven. And in order to hire sales, they're going to need to take a pretty big pay cut of 100K or so a year to start paying a salesperson, and just rough ballpark. And they go, ooh, I don't know if I want to take a pay cut to do this. So then, okay, well, your growth is limited. That's just the way it is. Now, obviously, there's other things. Maybe you can find fractional people. Maybe you can do marketing activities that cost less but generate some business. But either way, you need to be ready to make that pay cut decision for yourself at that stage. So, yeah, very interesting. So let's talk about these sales roles. When you've got somebody who comes in and is going to help you with sales, do they own the relationships, or do you try to, as the owner, own the relationships as much as possible and then have them kind of do more of the tactical work? Or does it, again, coming back to size, like as you get bigger, you can kind of have the salespeople who own their own relationships. When you're small, the founder probably needs to own them all. Like, how do you think about that?
Yeah, I think what you just said makes sense. Yeah, I think in the beginning, you're going to want to still be involved in those deals when you're smaller or just kind of starting out. I think once you get to a certain scale, then and you've effectively been able to kind of step out of some of those of the day-to-day new business, then yeah, I think you're leveraging your team, and you're maybe more as a CMO or CEO, I should say, kind of overseeing the overall business, and business development is just sort of one element of the broader picture of what you're doing, and then at that point, you're bringing in. But that being said, if it's a very lucrative client, you're probably still going to need to maintain that relationship, and you may need to still be involved in that pitch. I don't see a whole lot of firms, unless if even at the biggest level, if they're going for the big fish, they're going to bring in the big guns, to try to help close that deal. So I think you're going to have some level of involvement probably forever, but I think it's are you involved in the day to day? Are you involved maybe in over the more higher profile clients? And then how much then do you leverage some of the team and their relationships that they've built for you as well?
Yeah, it's a really tricky problem to like divide those roles up, because I do think that it's helpful to have, it can be a huge time saver to have your salespeople start to own those relationships. And if they're good at that and they really want to do that, but also there's a risk there because they are going to leave at some point. Theoretically, like at some point everybody leaves. So it's kind of like, how much do you want to put that trust in those people for the long term? I don't know. So last point that I want to drill into here about your work is you also advise clients on retention and growth within accounts. And I think this is a really interesting and challenging area for a lot of agencies. A lot of times we kind of think about, we close the deal, we've got the client, okay, great. Especially the sales focused organizations, they just move on to the next one, right? But there's so much potential in that growth. How do you get people seeing that potential and then starting to improve? Like, what are some of the maybe low hanging fruit for improving your retention and growth within accounts you already have?
Yeah. So, first off, you got to be doing great work, number one. And let's just assume that everybody listening here, they're doing great work, already. But I think it's really depending on how you have it set up, your account team, your project managers, listening to the clients and they're going to be telling you oftentimes, not maybe directly that, hey, we need this, but there's going to be clues along the way that they're experiencing other types of challenges that, perhaps you could help them out with. So I think part of it is that listening from your account team. I think also it is having an intentional effort to proactively come up with ideas. You're going to understand their business, and there might be challenges that they don't necessarily see, or other problems that, that they don't see. So it's also having a system, to, come up with those new ideas and regularly, meet with them and provide them with these types of opportunities that could help them out. And then, that is a great way then to, the more that you can be proactively thinking about their business and really seeing yourself as a true partner, the better that's going to be for the longer term retention and growth, of that particular account. And, also depending on the organization that you're working with, if you're working with a very large, organization, you might be working with one specific brand that's a part of a bigger, group, or you might be working on a, specific type of marketing, initiative, that is kind of siloed within that organization, but you can do other things as well. So it's, trying to get in front of some of the other decision makers, at that organization, and leveraging those relationships. So, and I think a lot of that is getting and meeting them in person. I think, and well, I love, the efficiency that we have now with virtual and remote, type of work. It's hard to sort of, the old school saying used to be like walk the halls, of these organizations. But again, how do you do that? We've seen clients, and we do this, for ourselves as well. Can you do like a free workshop for your client about something? And, you already have that trust, from them, but can you do a workshop and have them bring in maybe other people from other departments, or, or other brands? And it's a great way for you to kind of get exposure, to other people within the organization. And then we also sometimes will, it may also make sense to, even run account-based marketing plays to your own clients, so educating them about some of the other work that you've done for clients, in other areas. So, you could run targeted LinkedIn ads and share case studies. You can, there's any number of different things that you could do, but, the marketing doesn't necessarily have to only be for net new logos. You could and should be thinking about oftentimes marketing to your existing clients. And again, the objectives may change a little bit here or there, but that's another thing. And oftentimes, like, there's more room for growth, from your existing clients, and the efficiency of that revenue is also oftentimes much greater than trying to get the net new logos. But a lot of people don't think of it that way.
No, yeah, totally. I think something we do that right along the same lines is at least every year try to have a kind of rediscovery call with each of our existing clients, where we're essentially like pretending like we're starting all the way over. Now, obviously, we know we do certain work with them, but we're essentially wiping the slate clean and saying, "Hey, what are you guys working on these days? What's the challenge? What strategically has changed? What in your market has changed?" And it gives you a couple of things. Like, one is you get a sense of where they are at and their likelihood to renew or keep working with you in the long term. Strategically, they start to tell you about hires they're making. They're going to end up replacing some of the work you do. It's like good to know that ahead of time, and good to kind of like figure out, there may be some way we can work with them more explicitly or whatever. But then also, it's a good time to ask for these, like, "Oh yeah, have you talked to so-and-so in this department? Do you know them? Like, I've been trying to chat with them about some of this stuff too, and, haven't heard back." And you can get these like casual intros that you can't get otherwise, especially again, when it's an email, it feels less personal. Like, you can really get a lot more out of people when you jump into a 20-30 minute phone call than you do in the like, "Hey, what's new these days?" Like, nobody wants to write you an email updating you with what's new in their company. It's got to be more FaceTime if you can get it. So again, like you said, the in-person stuff's great. Even just setting up the virtual calls, like getting a way to get that happening more often is always good. Yeah. So Christian, last question I have for you. I always ask this to people because I'm a big reader. What's a book you've read in the last year or two that made a big impact on you personally, whether personal or business or a combination of both?
Ooh, that's a good question. I do read a lot of books. So I would say one of the books that has had an impact on me professionally and personally was a book called Winning Ugly. And it was by a tennis player. Brad Gilbert is his name. I might mispronouncing his name, but he growing up was playing tennis, but he wasn't fast. He didn't have a great, stroke. Like, by all accounts, like, he should not have become anything, right? But somehow he rose to be a top 10 player, and he beat every major tennis player in the like 80s and 90s. And ultimately, he felt that he was successful because of all these other things besides the talent portion of it. He became better prepared. He studied the game, better than anybody else. And that book, and there's a whole lot in there, but he went on to then coach like Andre Agassi and all these other great tennis stars. And that really resonated with me because, I think, at least for me, like, I've had to kind of earn everything that I've gotten. I feel like sometimes people, they might have certain relationships, or they might have certain, things that we don't have, right? But that book really resonated with me, that, as long as you're willing to put in the work and the effort and, be creative and innovative, you can have you can rise to the top just like anybody else. And, I've used that on the pickleball court, myself, who I don't come from a, racket sports and tennis background, but I'll think I bring other things to the table that maybe others don't. And I've tried to use that from a business perspective. I might not have the same resources as some of these other big companies, but I can be more nimble. I could be more creative. I could be more innovative. And so I love that term. That's winning ugly, and there's no shame in that. The bottom line is winning, how you get there, as long as you're ethical, so that was one that really, resonated with me and became kind of a motto for myself these days.
Yeah, I love that. Have you ever read any of Scott Adams' book? He's the guy who wrote Dilbert. He writes some books that are nonfiction, and first of all, I don't agree to everything he says, but he has a really interesting idea. This is similar, called skill stacking. And the idea is, let's say you're a really good basketball player, but you're not the best. You're not NBA tier yet, right? So you're a plus, but not an S tier basketball player. But you also have really good creativity, and you have good showmanship, and you really like people. What can you do? Hey, join the Harlem Globetrotters, right? Like, it's this weird stacking of skills that are unique that makes you really, really a superstar in something that maybe isn't the traditional approach. And obviously this tracks over to business. I was a decent engineer, but I was very good with people, and I liked management, and I liked the business side of engineering. And so I was gravitated towards roles that used more of that side. And I think everybody who's a founder has some certain skills that we're really good at naturally, and they stack in unique ways that make you kind of like exceptional in this weird combination of skills rather than exceptional in one single skill set, because that's again, like, not realistic. And like you said, with winning ugly, it's like, yeah, he may not be the best pure talent tennis player, but he figured out the other things he needed to do to be really good at the sport. I love that. Yeah. Cool. Well, Christian, this has been really fun. People can find out more about you on your website, which I will link in the show notes, and we'll link your LinkedIn as well. But yeah, any final calls to action or things that people should check out when they're browsing around?
No, I just want to, leave everybody listening in, if you're a founder and things are tough, you're not alone. I think that's one thing to take solace in, so
That's right.
just keep your head up and keep grinding it out. And but if you're just going to wait, for things to happen, you might be waiting a long time. And I think as long as there's a lot of great resources out there on our website, and just even other experts that are out there. And I think as long as you're willing to put in the work, you could still see success, and just hang in there.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks, Christian. And yeah, if you want to work with Christian or chat with him, christianbanach.com. And then hopefully I will see you around soon, Christian. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks, Karl. Appreciate it.
Thank you for watching this episode of Retain Trust. If you like this one, give it a thumbs up and subscribe on YouTube. It takes 2 seconds and it helps others find out about the show. And if you have questions or suggestions for a future episode, leave a comment. See you next time.